Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the 8-hour chart of silver provided by netdania.com. You can click on the link below. You can see the two primary downtrend lines drawn here, both from the pre-September SmackDown top of around $43. The first one comes down to this top and then this breakout, and the next one comes down to the recent top that we've had, and now they're rounding up. So the next breakout point is going to be $34 to $35 and then $37 to get a resumption of the bull market. The other two lines drawn here are the trend lines on the MACD. You can see from the September SmackDown low, we come all the way up to the most recent dip, and now we're rounding up through the zero line. The other one is this slowly increasing MACD line, and we're again rounding up to the zero line. So will we break out? Will we break out through here? And will we break out through here? If we do that, we're going to see a confirmation of a resumption of the bull market. So if we pull out to the daily, we can see it in more clarity. We do have that cross on the daily MACD. You can see we've just crossed and now we're rising. So is this going to be the beginning of a move, or are we going to go down and test that 26 level again? I think there's probably an 80% chance we go up from here, and probably about a 20% chance we go down. Now let's get to the main story of the night. This is going to take up most of the night because this is a very, very important story. The more I've analyzed it, the more I've seen how important it is. This is about the movie Looper, and I'm going to read a review of the movie so you get an idea. If you're a person who hasn't seen it yet and you want to see it and you don't want any spoilers, I suggest you turn it off now, because I'm going to read a review and then get into the plot and why it's so important. So let's begin with the review. This is a review I've chosen off of IMDb. This is a site you can go to get information on movies and the movie reviews. So this is one I've chosen. Fans of the sci-fi genre have been highly anticipating the arrival of a sci-fi flick, which upon its release has already won the acclaim of critics and audiences and has become a commercial success. All for good reason, because Looper is one of the most creative and one of the most entertaining films of the whole year. In the year 2074, time travel will become invented, but it will also become outlawed, and it's only used by criminal organizations. Whenever the mob needs to get rid of someone, they send their target to the year 2044, 30 years in the past, where a highly trained assassin known as a looper will be waiting to eliminate the victims. Joe, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, is one of those loopers, and meanwhile, on a normal day at work, Joe waits for his next victim until he finds out that his next victim is himself. Brought back 30 years from the future, played by Bruce Willis. I should stop right there, because if you walk into Looper completely blind, knowing only the part of the story, you'll be pleasantly surprised and satisfied. Writer-director Rian Johnson delivers one of the most original sci-fi films that help fully redefine the genre. This film has an incredibly original premise mixed with clever dialogue and well-developed storyline, although there are times when this movie tries to explain a lot and the audience will get a little confused. That doesn't count as a flaw. Rian Johnson gives this film such a dark and realistic tone, and the style feels original. The visual effects are groundbreaking, the editing is insanely good, and the action scenes keep the film alive. This film is consistent from beginning to end. There is not a single moment when this movie either fails or falls flat. For being a completely original film of the sci-fi genre, there are absolutely zero problems. Each scene always wants to go full throttle, while at the same time knowing how to not go too far. I'll let you finish reading that. Now, before I get into the film, I want to review a news story that I found when I was researching this film and researching the hints that are given in the film, and there's a lot of them about silver and about China. But before we get to those, let's read this news article, because this is absolutely stunning. This is a news article from The Guardian, And the headline is Sci-Fi Blockbuster Looper Achieves Chinese Box Office First. Rian Johnson's film was made with the help of Chinese funding in Shanghai and satisfies country's appetite for action. Artists can be notoriously reluctant to compromise their creative vision at the behest of the man. Not so director Rian Johnson. He agreed to transplant the plot of his latest sci-fi blockbuster to another continent, from Paris to Shanghai, in order to gain lucrative Chinese funding. The switch paid off. This weekend, Looper became the first new Hollywood film to make more money in its opening weekend in China than the U.S., provisional figures suggest. Quote, I'm thrilled the movie did so well in China. I don't think any of us expected those kind of numbers. It's fascinating to watch that market emerge and crazy to suddenly be part of the story, Johnson said. He insisted shifting the action from France to China was not a creative sellout, but, quote, gave us production value we'd never dreamed of. He added, in many ways, Shanghai was a more natural setting for a sci-fi movie than my beloved Paris. The film, which was shot for just $30 million and stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis as two versions of futuristic hitmen, made an estimated $21 million on debut in the U.S., but according to Deadline, it is likely to return $23 to $25 million in China. The change in location, along with a number of other concessions, allowed Johnson's tale of time-traveling hitmen to become a U.S.-Chinese co-production, allowing it to bypass strict rules on the number of foreign films shown in Chinese cinemas. Only 34 foreign features are allowed to be shown in Chinese cinemas each year. Co-productions, however, are exempt from this strict quota system, giving them a huge advantage in the world's most populous nation. Looper's stunning performance is sure to encourage other directors to tweak their work in order to appeal to the increasingly lucrative Sino audience, said Robert Kane, a producer and entertainment industry consultant who has been doing business in China since 1987. Quote, we will see far more of this in the future, he said. Like everywhere else in the world, Chinese people like watching films set in places they know, starring people who look like them. During a 5-day visit to Beijing last month, Titanic and Avatar director James Cameron said he was looking very seriously at the possibility of a co-production with China. He said he was visiting the country on a fact-finding mission to, quote, find out what restrictions need to be met, find out what content guidelines need to be met, and find out what the economic incentives are. The 3D reissue of Cameron's Titanic earlier this year became the first Hollywood production to perform better in China than the U.S. on opening. It ended up grossing $154 million in China, compared with $57 million in the States. More co-productions are likely after China announced in May it was to build a $1.27 billion Hollywood co-production film studio. Now, this is what I've been talking about, people. I've been talking about the cultural shift from America to China, just as we saw the cultural shift from Britain to America in the 1960s. Doing business in China means dicing with the country's strict censor board. Earlier this year, the baddies from Men in Black 3 were excised from the China edition after the censors took offense at the fact they were all Chinese. Portraying any public official in anything other than a glowing light was a risk in China, said Kane. Quote, police officers are always honest people of integrity who always catch their man. There is no bloody crime in China. There's no homosexuality, no nudity. Well, you'd say this film was an exception because there was some in it. And no excessively terrifying scenes. Horror is very difficult in China. You can't have ghosts or gore, no demons or monsters. With a potential 1.34 billion cinemagoers, China this year overtook Japan to become the biggest foreign market for Hollywood films. And I'll let you read the rest of that. I need to get to this story on Looper because this is really important. Now, I've read you the plot of it, and I want to go to some of the very important scenes in this movie because this movie has to do with silver and it has to do with China. So I'm going to start with the things that are relevant to that, and I've written that out in a notepad. So in the beginning of the movie, and I found some images from Google uh, from the movie, screen caps. In the beginning of the movie, he's a hitman, and silver is the payment for the hit. So they actually have bars of silver strapped to their back. Now, what's interesting is the bars, you can find this from the Looper Network. This is their site. You can go to the Looper site. The bars seem to be some type of kilo bars. I thought at first they were 10-ounce bars. When you watch the movie, he's stacking bars in a underground safe in his apartment. But these are pictures of the bars from the movie. That's what they look like, and they appear to me to be kilo bars. That's very interesting considering the fact that we had the tungsten bar issue in China, the rumors that they were remelting those bars and making them kilo bars. Well, we see kilo silver bars as well. And the next point is this hit issue. Now, this is a screen cap from the movie where the hit is made. He stands there with a shotgun waiting for the time traveler to come back, and he shoots him. Then his payment is strapped to the back of his victim, and it's in silver bars. Now, this is very interesting because they're implying a number of things here. First of all, that silver is the currency of hitmen, which is very interesting, and also that silver and gold, you'll see later in the movie that gold is the very valuable payment, but silver and gold have the ability to traverse time and maintain their value. So that's a very interesting point for a movie to make. Now, the next point we see is that the U.S. is actually a Chinese ghetto. A giant ghetto. When you see the scenes in the movie, the United States, the hitmen are riding around in very expensive vehicles, but the rest of the country looks like a gigantic tent city. There's poverty everywhere. Every scene from the United States is rundown, crime, decay, and just a general collapse, except for these hitmen. And the next scene that's really important is after he's made his first hit, he goes in to cash his payment, and he stacks his silver bars that he received from making the hit. He stacks them on the counter, and what he receives is cash. But if you look at the cash that he's handed in the window, you can see the face on this cash looks very much like Washington, but you can see that it's not Washington. It's actually Deng Xiaoping or Chairman Mao. It's actually Chinese currency. So we have Chinese currency and silver are the two legitimate currencies in the United States of America. That is a very fascinating observation for them to make in the movie. Next, there's a line in the movie where he's having a meeting with the head boss who comes from the future, who's in charge of the loopers, and he's talking to the main character, Joe, about his future, and Joe is always studying French. That's very interesting because, as we read in the article, the movie was moved from France to China, and one of the lines is, "You're studying up on your Mandarin? I'm from the future. You should go to China." Or actually, you're studying up on your French. You should study up on your Mandarin. So the head mob boss tells him that instead of studying up on French, he should study up on Mandarin because that's going to be the future. He's from the future. He knows. Now, the next scene is a scene where he's with his lover. She's a stripper, a prostitute, and that's in that current time that he's in. And he tells her that he wants to sacrifice half of his silver stack. He's been stacking silver. Most of the assassins in this movie take their silver and exchange it for that Chinese currency. But Joe, the main character, he actually saves half the silver and plans and stacks it underneath his apartment in a vault. And he tells his girlfriend / prostitute stripper that he wants her to live her life in freedom, and he's willing to give her half his silver stack and to take care of her child and go and live a normal life. And this is her reply. She says, "You're going to give me half your silver? Silver's got strings." Now, that's very interesting. We don't know what they mean by that. You'd have to try to figure out what that means. I don't know what that means, but it's a very interesting conjecture that silver is now the payment of assassins, but it also has strings. In other words, the very fact that you have silver means that you're a bad guy. So that's very interesting. And the last scene that I'm going to cover here is when we segue into the Bruce Willis character. This is where he escapes into he's required in the movie to assassinate himself. The loopers are required to liquidate their future selves to free the mob in the future from being responsible for the hit. So after they're done with their career, they end up assassinating themselves from the future. And I'm not going to give away the rest of the plot because there's a lot there. There's all kinds of other things that are in this movie besides this. But after they have completed their mission and assassinated themselves, then they get 30 years. Now he ends up spending 30 years in China. And this is what he sees when he goes to China. So he sees a picture of a very wealthy Shanghai. It covers the years that he lives in China. He basically goes there and is a drug addict and is a discotheque king, and he parties for 10 or 20 years until he runs out of money. But he trades his silver for Chinese currency and lives as a very, very wealthy man in China. So the movie gives us this juxtaposition of this extreme poverty in America and extreme wealth in China, and it's attached to silver. So I can't even tell you all the things that are implied by this. It's a very, very interesting movie, and I think it probably is going to become a sci-fi classic. I certainly wouldn't put it on the level of Blade Runner or other sci-fi classics, but the fact that it deals with silver, it deals with China, it definitely is implying that something is coming, and it has to do with silver, it has to do with China, and it's coming very soon. So there's a lot here in this movie. I highly suggest you watch it and try to figure out what they're implying. But it seems to me that they're implying that there's going to be a very strong move in silver soon, and it's going to have something to do with China. And we'll talk to you next time.